There are pros and cons to using gravel as a base layer for your pavers and using the Brock Paver base. One is tried and true, and when installed correctly will last for decades. The other is newer, can save you time, but are there places it should not be used? How durable is it? And will it save you money or actually cost you more? Let's find out. Welcome to Brew Builds, your place for DIY home improvements. I'm Paul. I'll be building a small paver patio using some leftover concrete pavers from the backyard makeover project. I'm going to build this a different way using the Brock Paver Panels instead of the thick layer of gravel that I used on the back patio to turn this into this. When I built the patio in the backyard, I used broken concrete and gravel as my base layer. I want to encourage you to watch that video as well. It will help you determine which paver base method will be best for you. Since this is my first time using the Brock Paver Panels, at the end of this project I'll have a very good understanding of both methods and I'll be able to compare the differences between the two bases. There was a third product that I looked into by Aspire Pavers. They use lightweight pavers made from recycled products. Looks cool. The pavers and the base fit together like Lego, but in my opinion, it's rather expensive. Tools and items needed: patio pavers, sand, paver base panels, a hand tamper, half-inch pipe or rebar, a long 1x4 or 2x4, a string level, 4-foot box level, a tape measure, paver edge restraint and spikes, a rubber hammer, a carpenter square, a wheelbarrow, some shovels, a rake and pick, a stucco trowel, a marker, knee pads, gloves and safety gear, and for my project I needed a concrete saw and plate compactor. If you're just building a small simple patio, these panels will work well for you. One of the most apparent benefits of using a paver-based panel is that they require less digging. So if you're doing the work yourself, this will save you time, less stress on your body, and you won't have to try to figure out where to put a bunch of dirt. However, if there's the potential of a lot of weight being on the pavers, like a driveway or equipment or a bunch of people, then these panels should not be used. On the brew scale, technical ability I rate between a novice and an expert. You need to make sure all your measurements are correct and square before placing the pavers. Physical ability I rate as hard. There may be a lot of digging involved, and lifting, carrying, and placing the pavers starts to add up. When I built this patio, I was in the need of a gravel base for the slab that I was pouring for the fireplace and barbecue structure. So it made more sense for me just to use a gravel base everywhere. Also, for this larger project, it was less expensive to use the gravel over the panels. To build the first patio, I had to break up some concrete, which I ended up using as part of my gravel base. It took a lot of time to break up into smaller pieces, but it saved me the cost of having to haul it off to the dump and then purchasing basically the same stuff. Since the new patio was double the size, I needed to buy some bulk bags of gravel to add to the broken concrete to create my 4-inch paver base. This was a lot of work. I built this little model for you so I can show you the differences in how much dirt you need to remove if you're using gravel as a base layer or if you're using the panels as your base layer. On the gravel side, you remove 7 to 8 inches of dirt, and then you add 3 to 4 inches of gravel, compact it using a plate compactor, then you add 1 inch of sand, and then the paver will sit right on top of the sand. On the Brock panel side, you remove 3.5 inches of dirt, and then use a tamper or a plate compactor on it, add in a 1/2 inch of sand and tamper that, then you place the Brock panel on top of the sand, and then the paver goes on top of the Brock panel. Cost-wise, it takes about 3 bulk bags or 1 cubic yard of gravel weighing 3,000 pounds to cover a 10 by 10 foot square area 3 to 4 inches deep. You will need 20 paver panels to cover the same area, but weighing only 20 pounds. However, they cost 2 to 3 times more than the bulk gravel, even with them on sale, plus a 10% off coupon. The Aspire paver system will cost you about 10 times more than that, but they do include the pavers. So depending on where you purchase your pavers from, the Aspire system can cost you twice as much as the paver panels, which will cost you more than using gravel. We purchased our pavers from a discount materials yard at about a quarter the price of retail. They had a limited selection, but we saved a lot of money on some quality pavers. If you like saving money and are flexible with color choices, check out the B-stock at local material yards over the large box stores. You may find yourself a great deal. I already have this area dug out, leveled, and I'm almost ready to start installing the panels. I just have a few more things I need to check. To determine how deep you need to dig down, you add together your paver height, the panel thickness, and then the leveling sand, which means you add 1 1/4 inches to the height of your pavers. My pavers are 2 1/4 inches, so if I add the sand and the panel, that will bring me to 3 1/2 inches that I need to dig down. The first thing I needed to do was clear out the area so I can measure and mark off the space for the new patio. I'll be building about an 8-foot by 12-foot square paver patio in this area. The foam paver panel is much easier to cut than a concrete paver, so determine your rough measurements from the pavers you'll be using, not the panels. There are a lot of different types and variations when it comes to concrete patio pavers. If you have the ones that you're going to be using, lay them out on the driveway or in a flat area. That way you can make a more precise measurement. This is easy for me to do since I'm using the same pavers I did in the backyard. Even though this is called an 8-inch paver, there are little nubs on the sides to allow sand to get in between and lock the pavers together. So 12 of these 8-inch pavers measures out to 99 1/4 inches, not 96 inches. I'll be using 11 pavers about 91 inches by 17 pavers or 141 inches, which will be just a few inches short of an 8 by 12 foot patio. You need some type of edging to hold your pavers in place. You could pour a concrete edge, use concrete block or treated lumber, all which require more digging, or use something like this. Now, this is the easiest to install, but not the cheapest. 4 of these edge strips, plus the spikes, cost me about half of what I paid for the 20 panels that I purchased. 6 by 6 treated lumber would be about the same. Using concrete block would be about half that cost. Your cheapest option would be to pour concrete edging, but if it's done incorrectly, it can, and it most likely will, crack. If you're installing this type of edge restraint, these will sit directly on top of the paver panel and the spikes will go through the panel. So add 2 to 3 inches for each side to your rough measurements for digging. I'll be using this walkway as one of my edges. When I built the patio in the back, I used some blocks from an old retaining wall that I removed as some of the paver edging. Now, I did notice that this was bulging out a little bit in this area, and I needed it to be straight and square. Fortunately, I purchased a concrete saw when I did the first paver project, so I was able to cut a nice straight edge here that I can put these pavers up against. To cut the walkway, I got my old trusty string line out and stretched it out between 2 pavers. I ran the string line along the edge of the straight part of the walkway and on top of where it needed to be cut. The gas company poured this newer section about 2 years ago when they replaced the main gas line out to the street. If you don't know exactly where the gas line is underground, be sure to call 811 before doing anything like this. Fortunately, I was here when they installed it, so I know I won't be cutting anywhere near the gas line. Using a straight edge, I marked a line, double-checked the distance from the house, and started cutting. That's a much better edge to start my pavers up against. You want to skim the dirt and avoid digging down deep. The soil beneath the panels needs to stay compacted. However, if you have a lot of trees and you know you have tree roots, I would dig down further and remove as much as you can. Over time, these tree roots will grow, and if they're close to the surface, they will start to lift your pavers up. One of the biggest hurdles for me was to get an old tree trunk root dug out of the ground. This took a while to dig, and chop, and pry, and cut, and move, and pry, and cut, But with some help from my son, we did get it out. And then I decided to run a drain line through this area from the backyard, which required more digging. This yard has a slight slope to it from the back to the front, and the new pavers could block the flow of water during a heavy rain. Adding in the drain pipe will help to avoid any flooding. From digging the trench for the drain pipe, I knew that there were some roots in this area that I wanted removed, plus some old pipes from a jacuzzi. I knew the pipes weren't connected to anything because they used to come up out of the walkway by the gas meter. I used a rototiller to help dig down about 3 to 4 inches. Then if I felt it hit something, I would use a shovel to dig down and remove the pipe or the root. After getting everything dug out, I filled the holes back in with dirt and then used a hand tamper. I can now start to remove the 3.5 inches of dirt required by skimming the shovel across the topsoil. The biggest challenge with this part is where to put all the dirt. I'm adding mine to a mound that I already have behind the wood pile. I'm going to remove some of the pebbles and then add some of this dirt into the front yard where a large tree was removed and I had to rebuild the brick wall. Because I did so much digging, I had to use a plate compactor on this soil. If you just skim the surface without digging down, a hand tamper will work fine. We have clay soil, and when it rains, which it did, it can turn into a mushy mess when it gets compacted, so I had to let it dry out for a couple of days. After a few more attempts, I was able to get a good compaction on the dirt. Now I can work on grading it and getting the area as smooth as possible. Brock recommends plus or minus a 1/4 inch, which is very flat. I used a rake, a hoe, a hand tamper to get the area flat and smooth and removed any loose material. I tried using a 2x4 across the surface to fix the high and low spots, but all the little pebbles made it quite difficult. Using the top side of a rake actually worked the best. You want a slope of about a 1/4 inch per foot for proper drainage. I'm going to match the same slope as the existing walkway, which is probably about half of that. I still need to double check my measurements and make sure that this area is square. Since I'm stuck with this fence post for now, eventually I'll rebuild this fence and gate and run the pavers out towards the driveway, but for now this will be staying. So I'll square everything from this corner, put in 3 stakes in the other corners, take my string line, run it around the perimeter, and then I can verify that I've removed enough soil, and I can also double check my grading to make sure that the water will drain away properly. This 1x4 represents the edge of the pavers. I'll square it to the walkway using a carpenter's square. If you don't have a square, use the 3-4-5 triangle rule. I marked 48 inches along the walkway, so 60 inches on the tape measure should meet up with 36 inches on the level. With this corner marked, I can measure from here and add the other 2 stakes for the corners, run the string line, and check that the diagonal measurements match. To do a quick check of the grading, I set the string at the same distance up from the dirt at each stake and put a string level in the middle. Looks pretty flat across and sloping slightly with the walkway, which is good. For more precise grading, you'd level the string, then measure the distance to the dirt. Water will flow from lower to higher numbers. I just need to remove a little more soil from this back edge and corner, and this area should be ready. It's a good idea, at least for me, to remove the string line when I'm done. Otherwise, it just becomes a tripping hazard. Since most walkways were poured using a 2x4 as a form, that would make them 3.5 inches thick, which is the same depth that I needed to dig down. So in theory, you should be able to remove an old walkway or patio and replace it with your paver, the paver panel in the sand, without having to dig any dirt. Now that is a definite plus. Brock recommends using a 1/2 inch layer of sand under their panels, which isn't much. To do this, you can use a 1/2 inch rebar, EMT conduit, or copper pipe, but not 1/2 inch PVC or galvanized pipe because they have an outside diameter of 3/4 inches, not a 1/2 inch. I have some of the 1/2 inch PVC pipe that I dug out of the ground, but that would make it 3/4 inch diameter. So I need to dig out a little bit of the dirt, that way I can set this further into the ground, and that will give me the 1/2 inch layer of sand that I need. This took a lot longer than I was expecting. Having so many little rocks in the soil didn't make this easy to do, so buy the 1/2-inch rebar or conduit and save yourself some time and hassle. I did find a 1/2-inch piece of steel tubing in the garage as well that I will use to keep the sand level. I also want to check the height with a panel and paver to see how well it aligns with the walkway. Not sure if something caused this section of the walkway to raise up or if this side is sinking. I also used a level and a 1x4 to double check that I'll still have the proper grading. The directions state to put down a landscape fabric. I thought to myself, what do you need a weed barrier for? What are the chances of a weed growing through one of these holes? Well, this isn't really for preventing weeds, it's to hold the sand in place so it doesn't erode away. You don't want anything eroding. Eroding! Another way to prevent eroding is to leave enough fabric on the edges so you can fold it up and over the panel and hold it in place with the edge strip. Time to go pick up the sand, but first I need to put on my thinking cap and figure out how much I'm going to need. To do that, you multiply together the width, the length, and the depth, or you do it the easy way and you just find a construction calculator online. If you're doing the calculations yourself, remember to convert the 1/2-inch depth to feet, which would be 0.042. So for my area, it would be 8 times 12, which would be 96, times 0.042, which would be 4 cubic feet. But to make it even more fun, you don't buy volume, you purchase by weight, in either a 1,000-pound bulk bag or 50-pound individual bags. A 1,000-pound bulk bag is 1/3 of a cubic yard, or 9 cubic feet. So 20 50-pound bags of sand would equal 1/3 of a cubic yard. To figure out the cubic yard amount, multiply the cubic foot amount by 0.037. So my 4 cubic feet will become 0.15 cubic yards, which is about 1/2 of 1/3. Good old fractions. You can purchase a 1,000-pound bulk bag for the price of about 7 50-pound bags. So buying bulk will save you money, especially on larger projects. I'll probably end up using around 700 pounds of sand to cover this area, fill in the gaps, and lock in the pavers. We do have a pickup, so it's easy for us to pick up and transport a bulk bag, and I'll be able to park close enough that I can shovel the sand directly out of the bag and onto the landscaping fabric. Most places do offer delivery options, so that is something that's worth looking into. Sweep or blow off the area before putting down the landscape fabric. Remember to leave enough on the end so you can fold it over the panels. Try to overlap the fabric at the seams. I didn't have enough fabric to do this. Once the fabric and the pipes are down, you can start adding the sand. Start at one end and work towards the other end, using a 1x4 or a 2x4 as a screed. I was having a hard time getting the sand level. A 1/2 inch isn't very much sand to compensate for any unevenness in the surface. I'm also finding that the sand is sliding across the landscape fabric, which is leaving some gaps. I found when I used the gravel base layer in 1 inch of sand, it was easier and quicker to get level. I'm not sure why they only recommend using a 1/2 inch layer of sand for these panels. Another difference between the two methods is with the panels you compact the sand with a tamper after screeding it before putting the panels down. With the gravel, you place the pavers directly on top of the screeded sand. I'm going to do one pass compacting the sand, then add another layer of sand, screed it, and compact it again. I'm hoping this will help the sand to stay in some of the thin spots. It's looking and feeling better. This was definitely more challenging to get level than it was when I used the gravel. I think I'm ready to pull out the pipes, add in some sand, and then level that off with the stucco float. Then I can start placing some of these panels. Time for me to go eat. Then I'll cut some of these panels and put the pavers down. These panels are easy to cut with a utility knife. I thought I would be efficient and just cut the panels in half, but then realized that they would be 3 inches short and the edge restraint wouldn't be sitting on top of the panel. Fortunately, I caught this mistake before cutting too many of the panels. You do want to stagger placing the panels between a full panel and a cut panel so the seams don't line up. I also need the width to be 6 inches wider. I'll add some 6-inch panel pieces in the center to keep the full panel size on the ends. These panels are directional with an over-under lip to help them stay lined up with each other. Note to self, don't use a leaf blower after putting down the panels. I didn't get that on video, but I do have a review video on this leaf blower if you're interested. I set my first row of 11 pavers in place and checked that it was square to the walkway. As I mentioned before, these cement pavers were purchased from a discount yard for about the quarter of the price. They were sold as is by the pallet. The large pavers equal to 2 of the square ones, which is equal to 3 of the small pavers. I'm pre-stacking the 17 rows I need for the patio with 1 large, 3 small, and 7 square, which is the equivalent of 11 square pavers. This will help me create an organized but random pattern, if that makes any sense. Some paver companies will provide a pattern you can follow with their pavers. Let the games begin. I'm using the same sand as the base to fill the space in between the pavers. I could use polymetric sand, but I had good results using regular sand with the patio in the backyard. Brush the sand back and forth and at different angles to work it into the cracks. Use a hand tamper over the entire area to settle the sand into the pavers. Sweep up the excess sand, then spray the pavers with a little bit of water. This is a great improvement and I'm looking forward to getting better use out of this area. I'm not 100% sold on the paver panels though. Walking around, I can feel some of the pavers move a bit compared to the pavers that were installed over the sand and the gravel in the backyard, especially these larger ones. Maybe using the polymetric sand would help with this. When using gravel as the base, the paver is placed directly on the sand, which does a better job leveling the individual pavers. And you can use a plate compactor on it with a rubber mat to make sure you really lock them into place. This seems less permanent, which in some ways could be a good thing if you decide to redo your landscaping in the future. You could get rid of all this very easily and replant the area without having to get rid of a bunch of gravel. It will also be easy to change or extend, which I think I'll do here along the walkway with the 2 panels I have left over. I can easily pull the edge restraint back up, dig out some dirt, add the sand, panels, and pavers. I hope you've enjoyed this video and it's been helpful to you. Leave a comment, hit that like button, and subscribe to Brew Builds. And be sure to watch my other video where I built a paver patio using gravel as a base. I believe this panel is really designed for the DIYer that doesn't own a bunch of construction tools and they just want to build a small patio in their yard. Its biggest plus is that it requires less digging and you don't end up with a mound of dirt in your yard. But if you want something that you know will last and you don't mind doing some physical work, then I would skip the lightweight stuff and go with some gravel as your base. Thanks for watching Brew Builds. Let's keep building.